let's think about what we would like to improve, because this is crucial to establish what metrics we would like to choose to measure it. For example, when we are thinking about the team's effectiveness, what is team's effectiveness? By definition, it is the ability of a group of people to deliver something successfully and efficiently.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Agile Chef. Today, we've got a real treat for you. We've got Ewa Mika, who is an Agile, well, you're an Agile coach as well as a Kanban coach. Would you
Yes,
like to say
exactly.
hello?
Yeah, actually, my job title right now is a Kanban coach, which is quite unusual, but it has a lot to do with what I specialized in, and I'm using a lot of improvements from Kanban method, and I'm also accredited Kanban trainer, so that was,
Awesome.
But basically, my duties are very similar to any Agile coach duties because I'm fostering continuous improvement across the energy solution department.
Fab. Awesome. But what is the difference between an Agile coach and a Kanban coach?
That's a good question. I think that Kanban coach has to have a knowledge about Kanban, but Agile coach on the other hand should also know all of the Agile techniques. So hard to say.
I think you're a professor in Kanban. That's when you specialize in something, you become that. Awesome, awesome. You're also a lecturer.
Yeah. Since the half a year now, almost a year now, I teach at Kosmiński University in Poland, and I'm teaching students on the management field of study. Yeah, that's how we call it. Who are studying management, and I'm running classes about the agile management and project management techniques, like tools and stuff.
Well, amazing to hear, because actually this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a real treat. We've got an expert in the field for you today, and we're going to be talking about scaling Kanban. This is something that is, that a lot of organizations get into. They get into scaling Agile, and their number one go-to is Scrum. But actually, we're saying, hold on. Scrum is, as great as it is, might not necessarily be the right solution. So today, we're going to be asking Ewa 4 questions. The questions are, what are the challenges with scaling Kanban, large-scale Kanban? And then we're going to talk a little bit about the metrics and the measurements in Kanban. We're going to also be looking at Kanban board design and complex workflows for complex workflows. That's a mouthful. And then we're going to be talking about Kanban adoption and change management. Right. So without further ado, let's pick up the first question here, and we're going to be talking about what are the challenges with large-scale Kanban? And just to frame the question a little bit more, many Kanban implementations struggle with scaling across large teams and projects. So can you please share some of the biggest challenges you've faced in implementing Kanban at scale where you work?
Sure. So the number one challenge with implementing Kanban anywhere, I believe, is that this is not something that will happen over a day. It requires time. It's based on the evolutionary change approach. So we are introducing small improvements one at a time, and through time, we are getting better and better and better. So as the Scrum is often or is just a framework to develop products, Kanban is not a framework. It's more like a method how we can improve. So it's the way for constant improvement. And we can use Kanban to actually improve Scrum framework, but we can also use Kanban to improve other stuff.
Yeah.
And when we are talking about the big scale, the biggest challenge with this requirement that we need a long time to see the results is that when we have a lot of teams, we should actually not do everything at once. What I did in our setup and what I would recommend for others to do is just to start with one team and start improving there, And when over time you will see first results and you will see first improvements, then it's much easier to also convince the management or to build interest in other teams to go the same way. So just basically lead by the example. Choose one
Absolutely.
team that can improve and show others that it is possible to improve that way.
So hold on. Big surprise here. You're saying approach it in an agile way, in an incremental way. This is great, right? Because it sounds really reasonable, but a lot of organizations struggle with that because it's all about big bang, lots of changes happening to everybody all in one go. But actually, let's be sensible here. Let's focus. Let's choose a group where we might have an experiment, run it with them, get some results, and then get buy-in, and then build incrementally on that. Sounds very good.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a particularly challenging situation?
Sometimes it's not possible to wait. Sometimes the change needs to happen very quickly. Like, for example, we can have some structural changes, organizational changes on the company level. And this is something that also happened in our setup in KMD Elements. And we had a smaller product merged with ours at some point in time. And there was no time for evolutionary change there because the change had to happen like from next month. Yeah. So sometimes it's not possible. And then you always need to remember that you always need to look for the right tools for the right situation. So whenever you are into improving and having better results and you can afford some time to achieve that, then Kanban practices will be a perfect way to do so. However, if you don't have the time, then it will be impossible because, as you mentioned before, when we are doing this big transition, like many agile transformations used to happen before, it's a big change that is actually targeting people's identity, their job titles. They are afraid. There is a lot of negative emotions involved in this change. So it is very hard. And we all know that from the traditional change management. So if we know that agile values and agile approach is a little bit different, then we should, of course, whenever it is possible, try to do it in the more humane way.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you very much for that. Anything else you want to add to the challenges in large scale Kanban before we move to our next question?
Well, we can talk entire hour about the challenges because, as the theory of constraints says, there is always something challenging, right? You tackle one problem and then appears another one. So there is always something. And I believe that the other side of what might be difficult in such Kanban adoptions is that, for example, what happened to our first team which used Kanban. Because the first team that did it was the platform team, actually, and they left Scrum approach due to changing requirements all the time. They adopted Kanban practices, created Kanban board that was visualizing their system. They were using Kanban metrics. And they improved to the way that the predictability and lead times and lead time distribution was good enough that they stopped improving. And right now, whenever I'm meeting with them once a month on the flow review to see how is the workflow going and are we still, in line with what are the expectations towards these teams, we can see that, well, everything is fine, nothing to improve. And on the one hand, it's, well, that's nice. It's a good thing that we are predictable, that we can keep it that way no matter how the environment changes. And we had a lot of changes outside of the team during that time. And the team was more or less still predictable with the results. However, is it still Kanban if we stopped improving? I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Kanban, the first thing that comes to mind is Kaizen, right?
Yes, exactly. You never stop improving.
Yeah, incremental improvements. So it's interesting. What does it become then without that sort of without the Kaizen? Does it just become a set of columns where you're moving your work?
Well, I guess it's just a work management then.
Okay, yeah, a work
Yeah,
management
work management
workflow sort of
way. Like
thing. Yeah,
you have some sort of process, you visualize it, measure it, and
yeah.
that's it because you don't improve it very much.
But and then I guess, you know, if we think about that, so that's Kanban, and but then how do you scale it? How do you scale it in an organization?
Okay, so you can scale Kanban in different hmm, not a project, but directions, in different directions. So, for example, you can scale Kanban across other teams. So you have one team, and then another team will be using Kanban, another, and another, and another. And they are, for example, on the same level in the product development
Yeah,
setup.
we're talking about like a network rather than a
Yeah,
hierarchy.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is like one way to scale Kanban and, for widen it up.
Yeah.
And then we can also scale Kanban up. So
Okay.
on the higher level, for the higher level planning, like for example, if the teams are working on the user stories level,
Yeah.
so we can scale for more teams with more user stories, but we can also scale up towards the feature management and workflow management of the higher work items. I don't know what we might be using, like features, epics, different tools have different names, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
this higher level of planning, of requirements management, and things
Yeah.
like that.
Epics, capabilities,
Exactly.
portfolio epics, and
Exactly.
strategic themes. It's just everybody's got their own names, kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think that the most important thing when you're thinking about scaling at all is to ask yourself why you would like to scale. What issues are you trying to solve? Is it to improve collaboration? Is it to improve the knowledge sharing? Or maybe to reduce some dependencies and blockers, reduce the waiting time? Like, what is the goal? Because when
Mm,
you answer this question, it might be much easier to see which teams actually should or could be included in the scaling.
I love that. And that is a great segue into the next question, actually, because the next question is metrics and measurements in Kanban, right? So let me frame that question for us. Kanban emphasizes continuous improvement, but measuring progress can be tricky. So, what Kanban metrics do you find the most valuable for tracking large scale initiatives, and how do we use them to inform improvements?
Mm, That's a tough question. So let me
I'm
start.
sorry, I feel bad. I feel bad like asking. But you
So
know, we
it's
were talking, we kind of, like I said, you know, it was kind of a segue, wasn't it? Unless
yeah,
I imagined it.
yeah. First, like maybe let's think about what we would like to improve because this is crucial to establish what metrics we would like to choose to measure it. For example, when we are thinking about the team's effectiveness, what is team's effectiveness? By definition, it is the ability of a group of people to deliver something successfully and efficiently.
Yeah.
Okay, so how we can measure this success, how we can measure this efficiency, how we can measure other things that we need. And we have different metrics for different things. So this is the first step to establish what you would like to measure, what you would like to improve, actually. So, for example, when we are talking about this ability to deliver fast, so this efficiency,
Yeah.
then basic metrics that we all know from many different methods or ways of working is time to market. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And Kanban is using lead time values and lead time distribution with the percentile and statistical process control to actually tell you what is your time to market, what are the waiting times for specific process steps, and this is the basic metric to measure our ability to deliver fast.
Is
However,
that your
yeah,
lead time, and is that what the lead time or the throughput, or because these are the measurements that I know, and I'm being schooled here, so thank you.
yeah, like lead time distribution and throughput and number of items that are active at the same time are actually connected together by the Little's law. It's a law created by a physicist. So this is like proven thing from math and physicist point of view. And I know what I'm saying because I studied nanostructure engineer at Faculty of Physics. So
And you know what? That's the other thing. That was the other impressive thing that I forgot to mention in your introduction at the start. Thank you for mentioning that.
Oh yeah, so I like metrics, I like statistics, and that's why also I like Kanban, because it relies on the statistical approach very much. Okay, so other metrics. Yeah, we have the lead time distribution, the probability of achieving a specific lead time value for new items, the predictability. So how long is our tail on the histogram with the lead time distribution? But we also have other things, like for example, discard rate. How many items that entered the system, how many items we started working on were rejected or were discarded during the work.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
The other thing, when we are thinking about the efficiency of our entire process, end-to-end workflow. So what about the requirements preparation? From my experience in many companies, this is usually where the pain is. So
Absolutely.
how do we tackle the requirements preparation? What is the process there? Can we map it? Can we see where we have, for example, longest waiting time, or what needs improvement? Maybe we need some better clarification because we have too many rework coming back. Oh, and this is another metric. How many items after we complete them go back to be redone again because something was misunderstood?
Wow. Wow. And honestly, it just like opened up my mind on so many things that I'm seeing day to day at work. So can I just take you back to one that was super interesting? You said the preparation time. Are we talking about like, you know, identifying what value we want to deliver as a business? Possibly if you're if you've done your due diligence, you'd have a vision, you'd have OKRs, KPIs, and then these would inform what you want to achieve in a quarter, and then the information that goes into these either capabilities or portfolio picks, whatever you want to call them. There's never enough information in there for people to actually, confidently say, yes, we're happy, we know what we're doing for this quarter. And is that what you mean? Like the acceptance
Yes.
criteria, the description, all these
Yes,
things?
exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify for myself and for my listeners.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And when we are talking about business metrics, then we cannot forget about any quality and usability metrics. They might not be so strictly connected to Kanban. However, if Kanban is a way to improve the processes, then things like customer satisfaction, usability, and quality of our solution is also relevant, because if we would like to improve the quality of the product, then we have to measure things connected to the quality, right? So for example, the amount of bugs, the time we do the bug fixes in, or the amount of customer complaints, things like that. So it's always going back to the beginning of your questions. It's always the matter of what we would like to improve.
Amazing, amazing. I honestly, like, we're obsessed with user stories. How many user stories did we complete? Epics. How many epics did we complete this quarter as opposed to last quarter? And we're always, people who are agile coaches who understand that actually that's not the right thing to focus on, because these are things that can be gamified. They're things that can be changed. They're not actually measuring how much value we're delivering. It's not the right thing to look at. But and that's what I preach and what we preach at work. But it's so interesting because I honestly, I've not thought about the things that you're saying here, so I'm gaining a lot of value just listening to you. Thank you for that.
Can I share a screen for a minute?
Please do.
Okay, can you see it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
What have we
So
got here?
here is the example of the usual metrics I always create at the start whenever a team is starting using Kanban. So whenever the team is introduced to Kanban practices and starts to implement some of them, I prepare metrics like that to see how we are going overall with our system. So how we are going overall with our process and workflow. And what you can see here, the first chart is the demand versus capability. And this is the cumulative flow diagram that is on the top chart, only presenting the new items versus completed items. And on the bottom chart, it shows all the states that are also in between.
Mm.
And what we can see here on those tiles is the specific number of items created and completed for the same time span. So, for example, for the last 30 days, there was 45 items created and 35 items completed. So it looks like, well, we had more input than we were able to actually take into our system and complete. Yeah.
Yeah,
But when we look at the previous month, because 1 month might not be so representative, so we also need to look a little bit back. And I also really encourage all of you to do the comparison of data, to look
yeah,
at the data, how they looked like 3 months ago, 2 months ago, and today. It really open it will open your eyes to many different conclusions than if you are only looking at the current situation. And when we look a little back here on this chart, we can see that, well, the previous month was actually not so bad because there was almost the same amount of items created and completed.
yeah.
So based on this chart, I would say that this team is, well, more or less the system is efficient. Yeah, so they are
Yeah, it's
capable
healthy
of delivering the amount of stuff that they receive.
that they committed to. So, can I just ask you, is this product or is this fixes?
Well, this is actually the chart from the ETL team, which is the migration team. So they have batches of work whenever they need to migrate the data from the customer to our system, which we are developing.
Yeah,
So they are basically using SQL and their magic to transfer the data from customer to our system and make it work. So those items are pretty much. Mm, Some of them are unpredictable. If something goes wrong, for example, during the migration, and there needs to be some adjustments done in the system to actually be able to transfer all the data from the customer side.
yeah.
Or it can be pretty much planned because we might know that, for example, next month there will be a migration of customer X and we need to prepare for it.
Gotcha.
So they have different types of work, and this is also important for metrics to realize that not every work item is treated the same in the system, that urgent stuff will be done quicker than regular stuff, and we need to remember about that.
I love that.
What you can also see here is the lead time distribution, which is called cycle time here because it doesn't include the time that tasks are waiting in the backlog. It
Yeah,
is only since they were taken by the team and completed. And we can see the distribution. So how many items were completed in how many days. And we can see that a lot of them were completed under 10 days.
yeah.
And we only have two outliers that have more than 3 weeks. Yeah, we have something here and we have something here.
And then you can drill down into what are these types of items so that you can
Exactly.
get better at predictability later
Exactly.
on. Lovely. I love that. Yeah.
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 On the
Sorry.
right side, the last thing on the right side is basically we use it for estimation. So this is, instead of guessing how much time something will take, we can just use the statistics and the historical data. And please trust me, from many teams, many companies, statistical data is always more true than what you might think it will take. So guessing is always more risky than
Yeah,
actually looking at the historical data, if we have them, of course. Uh,
absolutely. Yeah. And it depends on how well you've been estimating, how well you've been breaking down. So when you mention the whose law was it again?
Little slow,
Little's, yes, I was going to say Little's law.
like
It's more
Stuart
about
the
sort
Little.
of similar items, isn't it? Rather than very varied items, and that's where it becomes really predictable. However, we
That's
can
not true,
find,
actually.
is it
Let me
not?
stop you here. No, it's not true. It's a
Oh,
common
tell me.
misconception because if you would like to use the statistical approach to estimation, this hashtag no estimate approach or whatever you call
Yeah.
it, you don't have to have items the same size because
Ooh.
size doesn't matter. I mean,
You know
Honestly.
what? Like I said, I'm only at the start of this book. That's why I'm saying that. I think if I get through this book, I'll probably be singing the same hymn that you're saying there. Great
Yeah,
to hear, though. That's really good because then it becomes a lot easier to be able to do this.
yeah.
If every single size has to be the same, that's where it becomes really difficult to do.
And you know what? Because the size of the item is not the most important thing that will influence the lead time. Do you know what will actually influence the lead time the most?
No, tell me.
Priority.
Oh, interesting.
You can have a really small or really simple task that has low priority, and it will take longer than very big, very complex task that, for example, is, production on fire and everything is burning and every hands on deck. We need to fix it ASAP.
Yeah. Wow.
So size doesn't matter, priority matters.
Prior
And
commitments. So
therefore,
if we're always focused on the most important, most valuable things, you will
yeah.
get a heck of a lot more value out of it than all the other bits that are sort of floating around and keeping
Yeah.
people busy.
And what is even more interesting, I think, is that if you think about it, then if you would like to use, as I'm presenting here, the statistical approach for estimation,
Hmm.
then you can, what you see here is quite actually is a small amount of time. 1 day to 8 days. That would be the most probable scenario for the team to complete a new item. That's quite narrow. So it's okay. Yeah, if you will say to the management that you will complete a new item under 8 days,
Yeah,
then yeah, well, that's good enough.
that's good
Uh,
enough because forgive me for saying, but that's a sprint, right? 2 week sprint.
no, 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 those are 8 calendar days.
8 calendar days. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
a
weekends
two
included.
week sprint is okay. Oh, calendar days rather than work days. Okay, got
Yes,
got
yes, yes,
got
yes.
got.
Those are the calendar days because this is how long the customer or other teams are waiting, right?
Ah, interesting. What is at the top you've got demand versus capability. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what demand is and what capability is in your world?
Sure. So demand are those new items. So every new request that comes to the team that appears in their backlog, that comes from messages or managers or other teams or the customer or whatever. Yeah.
Hmm,
So this is the demand, the things that they need to do.
gotcha.
And the capability is the things that they are able to do. So the things they completed.
Okay.
So like amount of stuff that was created versus amount of stuff that was completed.
Okay, so the amount of things that were done versus the amount of, sorry, the amount of things that were committed to versus the amount of things that were actually done.
Yes.
And that's where we got that 41 committed and then actually done 40. And then the next month, 45, 35. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
And one last thing,
Yes.
going back to this size and priority thought, when we can see this estimation 1 to 8 days for all of the items inside the team, I said that it is good enough, at least for this team's context. However, sometimes you might observe that when you will prepare this lead time distribution for your team, that the time frame will be bigger. And it can be like, for example, 1 to 30 days. And this is something that is not viable for us because that information doesn't give us any estimation. So if size doesn't matter, then how we can distinguish which items have high probability of being completed in 1 or 2 days and which
Mm,
items will be completed in 30 days, right?
yeah.
So we should actually try to split our work items, work items is the best word, requirements, whatever we are doing, the tasks. We should split them on categories based on the priority, like, at least urgent and standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Minimum.
then we can measure and do the lead time distribution for two categories separately. And then we can say, for example, that urgent stuff we complete 1 to 3 days. And 85% of our urgent task is closed under 3 days because this is urgent. However, if it's a standard request, then it takes, for example, 10 to 30 days.
Mm,
Yeah. And
mm,
this is the information that also helps you prioritize better. because you actually know what does it mean that something has high priority, what does it mean that something has low priority, how it will influence the time of the delivery.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because let's say you're a large organization, and you've got built-in silos because it's a traditional waterfall approach company and they're going through an agile transformation. Your department or your function's priority is different to others. What if there was a priority that can't be addressed because it's a dependency on something else? How do you deal with that when you're scaling? Go ahead.
So if I understand your question correctly, you're basically asking me about how we handle dependencies.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, yeah. And I was just throwing in that there's a high priority dependency and it needs urgent attention.
Yeah, okay, I will stop sharing now. Um, well, of course, whenever something is blocked by the dependency or some other external thing, then first thing we need to visualize that this is blocked. So we usually mark it with some tag or red color so that it, kicks you in the eyes when you look at the board. And this is the first thing so that everyone will know that this is stuck.
Hmm.
And then we should either escalate or address. That depends. Because if this is something that the dependency is, for example, with the other team, we can always reach out to the other team, ask if they know that we have the dependency. We actually have sort of a bigger planning every 2 months. So every 4 or 5 sprints. That actually depends on the customer's availability because it's connected with the customer feedback gathering. And every 2-3 months when we are doing this bigger planning, we are
Hmm.
trying to identify dependencies up front
Yeah,
because we know what our goals will be for the upcoming 2 months.
yeah,
Longer time frame is impossible to plan. So,
yeah. No, I
two
agree.
two
I
months
agree.
is just, it's also quite big. But yeah, and we are planning what each team will be focusing on, which goals we should deliver. We are actually working on goals. And I can also share a screen for a minute. This is the draft of the setup I work in right now at KMD. And what we have here is that for this once per 2 month planning, we are establishing the goals, the customer processes that will be implemented, and we are identifying which Scrum teams should group together and cooperate together to implement them.
Oh,
Because
that's
we have
interesting.
yeah, we have Scrum teams assigned to domains, like they're responsible for parts of the system they created. And when we have a customer process that actually goes through the different domains end to end, then we need all of those teams to collaborate together. And as we have 20 Scrum teams right now, it would be impossible for all of us to work together. And it also doesn't make much sense. So we are just grouping around the goals customer processes. As you can see here in the middle, there are the enabler teams or supporting teams, or however we would like to call them, which are using Kanban
Hmm.
without the Scrum. And they are just having their own workflows improved by Kanban and are actually supporting the Scrum teams in their delivery.
Yeah.
So wherever we know that we will have those dependencies around the goal, or for example, the team inside this green, one of the green teams inside has dependencies to other teams, we just try to upfront plan for when more or less it can be ready so that other team will know when they can start with their part. So yeah, it's like, big scale Tetris a little bit, but
Yeah. No, it works. Do you know what? If it works, it works, right? And I love how
uh,
you've grouped certain teams together to sort of have that ability to resolve or to to sort of evolve whatever it is that you're coming up with, whether it's product, whether it's a solution, whether it's a feature, etc. So that is really interesting. And then you've got in the green, you've got these guys are working in Kanban, so they're much more reactive to the needs
yes,
of the squads around them.
exactly. And one other thing that I think we can mention also here is that those teams and those groups of teams, as you can see, sometimes there's only one team for customer goal or process. Yeah, so that's a good situation. Low dependencies. Woohoo! However, those groups change. Each time we are doing this bigger planning, they might change, and different teams will group together to achieve different goal, because those goals are set for 2 months, right? Right. So this
Yeah.
is dynamic. It's not
It
set
does
in stone.
sound very dynamic. So can I ask, is this the individuals within the teams, or is it the squad, the teams themselves that move around?
The teams are grouped differently. So like on this picture, for example, we can see that team 12, 5, and 8 are grouped together.
Yeah,
And let's say that 2 months from now, team 12 will be with team 1 and team 5
gotcha.
will be with team 2 and team 8. Yeah, things like
I
that.
love that. That's very nice. I love the idea of that. It's so
But
dynamic. And I love
please,
the
please be
idea.
careful with stealing this idea, because I don't want it to become a Spotify model, if you know what I mean. I mean,
I am
this
definitely going to nick that off of you.
No, I mean, like, this is something that in our setup is working, but
Absolutely.
we ended up in this structure after many trials and errors.
Yeah.
First, we were one big product. When we had more than 11 teams, it was pain in the to actually communicate with one another and know what is going on inside the
Yeah.
product, and the dependencies were killing us.
Yeah.
So we tried to split, we tried to introduce some scaling mechanism. Like, for example, we have the risk management using Scrum of Scrum meetings. So like we have daily after daily after daily on different levels to escalate
Mm.
risks as fast as possible to higher management if needed. And it actually, first we split it in half into two guilds. We call them guilds. There was
Yeah.
one guild and the other guild. And after 2 months, it turned out that, well, the goals that one guild had and the goals that the other guild had dependencies between each other. So we didn't actually solve our issue because the dependencies were still there between the two guilds. So we
Interesting.
were trying to split it different ways. We had a lot of different workshops with product owners on the business side, with
Mm.
developers on the more architectural side, and together, and whatever, many different workshops and ideas how we should actually split to make it work. And there was no silver bullet, no great solution.
Yeah.
And only after some trials and error, we ended up with the situation when we are actually dynamically grouping around those goals. So
Amazing.
this is something that works for
Well,
us.
of course, because
And in
every
your
company
setup, it
has its
might be,
own context.
yeah,
There's no one size fits all. There's no,
exactly.
I've heard it being mentioned so many times, a cookie cutter approach, one size fits all. That's not true, because, you go to a large company or even a small or medium-sized company, each department has their own context and the way that they work. So you can't have one solution, just go, oh, this is the Spotify sort of model. We're just going to adapt it and we're going to be just like Spotify. No, that doesn't
Exactly.
work. But that's the thing, right? It's bringing people, and that's why a Kanban coach or an Agile coach is such an important role, because they should have the facilitation and the know-how skills to bring people onto these journeys to make the best changes that fit their purpose and their needs. I apologize for that massive segue, because we were actually talking about, what were we talking about? We were talking about metrics. I absolutely love it when a conversation just sort of flows and moves on to other bits. But let's see if we can bring it back for our viewers, beg your pardon, not my users. Um, I'm thinking from a product perspective here. Okay, so the next question is about the Kanban board designs, and how can we better design Kanban boards for complex work frames. So designing a Kanban board that reflects complex workflows can be challenging. Can you walk us through the process you use to design Kanban boards for large-scale Kanban implementations?
So I can first share my first mistake, because when I was firstly, approaching Kanban and introducing Kanban practices to the first team, I actually made all the mistakes I could. And I did it from day to day, like, since tomorrow you will be doing Kanban. Yeah, I introduced the board, I introduced everything. It's like, okay, now we are doing Kanban with Kanban metrics, with limits, let's go.
Kanban with a capital K.
Yeah. And this is not how it should be done. Especially the Kanban with capital K, which is the Kanban method, right? Which should follow some specific steps that I later learned that they exist. And what is even more funny, what is funnier? Sorry for my English. What is even funnier is that I actually, using trial and error approach, decided that, well, first we need to talk about issues. We need to know what issues we would like to address with the Kanban practices. And when we list down the issues that we have inside the team or inside the product or project or whatever, then we can think, okay, so we have those issues. Which Kanban practices can help us address them?
Yeah. Okay.
And if you ask this question at the very, very beginning, of course, you need to explain what Kanban practices are to the team, right? To the people involved. But when you do so, even briefly, they will start thinking like, what can help them resolve those issues from Kanban practices or from other tools. Like, actually, you don't need to narrow it down to Kanban, just improve. And then whenever those practices got chosen by people involved, by the team members, there is much higher chance that they will actually do it. So, whenever I come to the team and tell them, okay, since tomorrow, you cannot have more than 5 items in active development. Will they listen? Well, I don't know. Maybe I can justify it a little better so that they can understand why I believe it will help them. But it's still not their idea, not something that they wanted to do. Here, when you are talking about the issues and letting the team decide which practices can help them, and they are actively thinking how to address those issues with Kanban practices, then they feel like, okay, I invented the solution. We should have no more than 5 items active in the same time.
Awesome. And so just to use agile lingo, are we talking about WIP limit?
Yes.
Yes, work in progress limit. And so yeah, I've got the same thing, right? I go into a board and I look at it and I see this guy's got like 8 or 9 items that he's working on for I can't even tell you how long it was. And I'm just thinking, why have you got all these things up? It's like juggling balls. You're going to drop them. You're not and nothing's being completed. So one of the things that I was saying was, okay, you've got 8 things up. What are the most urgent ones? Let's do those 2. Just leave the other ones. Set the other ones aside. Just work on those 2. Get them done before you take the other ones on. And all of the sudden, he's like, yeah, it was like in magic, So what about the design of the Kanban columns, if you like?
Yeah. So you're starting with those issues, right? When you start with issues, you have those practices chosen. That's nice. And then I'm using the system thinking approach to introducing Kanban, which is called static in short. Static is something that is actually developed by Kanban University, and you can learn how to do it on my classes.
Awesome.
Of course,
So are we going to get a link that I can put in the description for this video?
Yeah.
So that you guys
Thank you.
this, please do. There's so much more to learn on this topic, but yeah, continue, Ewa.
Yeah, so you can learn all about it and do exercises on your example performing static with me on those classes. So yeah, feel free to join. And basically, it's a set of steps that allows you to introduce Kanban in the more humane way than I did at the first time.
In a more humane way. Okay, I love that.
Yeah, and Actually, it focuses on understanding the system, understanding your workflow first, and designing the board to visualize this workflow as the last step.
I like
So
that.
you don't start with the board, you end
That's
with the
right.
board.
That's right. Do you know what? And that's where I find everybody going, when you're doing an agile transformation, they're literally given a board and a workflow and told that's what you've got to do, rather than can we just visualize how you actually already do stuff, right? So you start building the step by step and the complexity of it starts to come out. And then at the end of that, that's when you should come up with something that actually is similar to what they're already doing.
Yeah. And even if we think from the traditional change management point of view, we also have those three steps, right? Like we have the current state and we have to defreeze it. Then we have the change that is happening. And then we have the new process that we have to freeze and give people those new ways of working and make them be used to it,
Yeah.
make them used to work that way. And even then you start with mapping the current situation to understand the current situation, and then you introduce changes to optimize the process and introduce new process. Kanban approach with the evolutionary change is actually a little bit similar from this point of view, that you start where you are now. It's only logical that you first need to understand your current situation to be able to improve it, right? So you start with understanding what is happening around you, what is happening inside the team, what is
Mm,
happening around the entire workflow, what the workflow is end to end. Do you
yeah.
actually work on the entire workflow inside your team, or maybe your team is part of something bigger?
And of
Yeah,
course, that's the benefit. One of the benefits of that is you'll start to see where the bottlenecks are, right?
exactly.
Where you need to focus on improving your process so that you remove these bottlenecks.
Exactly. And what's more, you need to also understand the demand that is coming. So, what is requested? Who are your customers? What they expect? How fast you should react to their requests? Maybe
Mm,
some customers require you to respond urgently. Maybe some customers can be treated a little bit differently in the lower pace. How do you prioritize? How do you decide which stuff is important, which stuff is urgent, which stuff is not? How do you decide which items or which tasks won't be done at all? Because we all need to remember that product management, backlog management, request management, whatever we call it, whatever we do,
mm,
always includes also the ability to saying no, to, like, letting go of some of the work that comes to us. So what are the criteria that we are using to decide about that?
yeah.
Only if we understand all of it, and only if we understand the nature of our work, the priorities. So basically the classes of services, so different kinds of priorities, so that we can observe them separately and then have measurements separately and then know about each type of service we provide, what is the time we need to complete it.
Mm, I
And
like
only
that.
then we have the view on our situation, and then we can draw a board. Why
That-
only then? Because the board is the visualization of our
yeah,
workflow. Yeah. So we need to know
absolutely.
the workflow to visualize it.
Okay, so can I ask you a couple of follow-up questions? Um, does that mean that you've got different teams with different workflows and different columns? Okay, you're nodding, you're saying yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, and then how do you then, or do you even need to, for information or work items to move from one board to another? Other than the impediments, like if you've got a
Mm-hmm.
blocker, you need to visualize it in another board because there's a different team looking at it, that sort of thing. um but is there a scenario where you might have a work item that lives on a board and then you've got other teams that are contributing towards it?
Well, yes, because that depends on the level we are looking at. Yeah,
Mm,
when I told about the scaling on different perspectives, we can scale also up, yeah, on this higher level. And when we are looking, for example, on this bigger parts, like the goals I was mentioning, yeah, then we have different Scrum teams contributing to one goal. So they are all contributing to one item. And well, we don't actually have in our setup a board that is monitoring the progress of each goal. We have other metrics for that. We don't have the board visualization for it. However, we are using the visualizations on the feature level from different teams so that we can see which bigger parts, bigger than basic items, which are user stories, and the teams are working on user stories, right? But we can see those bigger parts, those bigger chunks, the features, when they will be completed by each team, and a couple of features are creating a goal. So right now, we are not visualizing the progress of goals themselves, but we are looking at the features and user story level. So yeah, I guess that will answer
You
your
know what?
question.
I have 100 questions on that, but I'm going to try to stay clear on what we're trying to achieve in this, because that is something else that I've got to bring us back to what we're doing here and what we're talking about. Can I ask you, what tools, what software do you use to design your boards?
Yeah, we are working on the Microsoft stack. We are using Azure DevOps. I use Power BI for most of the metrics.
Yeah.
We are also using the Azure dashboards. They are quite useful as well.
Awesome.
And in Azure DevOps, you can also link items between boards. Yeah, so you can see the predecessor or that something is waiting for something else. So this visibility is, of course, present in our boards and backlogs.
Yeah. And when you're thinking, when you're gathering that information, when you're looking at the steps of your current team and how they like to work, and then, so what are you using to do that? Is it like literally post-its on the walls, or are you using like a collaboration tool to look at the flow of the process, the current
Yeah,
process?
Azure DevOps. Yeah, everything
Oh,
is
you
in
do
Azure
that
DevOps.
in the Azure DevOps. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Okay, awesome. I think we should move on to the next column, to the next question. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. Okay, Kanban adoption and change management. The question is, shifting an organization to a new way of working can be very difficult. What strategies have you found most effective for promoting Kanban adoption?
Leading by example. That
Leading by.
is that is the easiest way to introduce any change, actually. Just choose one team, find what the issues are, fix them with Kanban practices, see the improvements going, start measuring the things you would like to improve, right? So like the efficiency, predictability, things like that. And when you see the outcome, when you see the results that the team is actually improving, or maybe in your context, it will be more focused on the communication inside the team or many other things that might be important, right? That can also influence the performance of the team. Then when you have your first success with the first team, others are starting to looking at that. So other teams will start asking questions. Can we try it? Maybe it will help us as well. And also when the developers are happy, and they usually are like from my experience, every time I introduced any Kanban practices to the team, even into the Scrum team to improve their Scrum framework, the developers were happy about it. So Kanban is developer friendly.
It really is. It really is, isn't it? I found lots of people take more to, and I keep wondering, is it because they don't have to worry about the cadence that comes with Scrum, and they don't have to do the daily stand-up? And a lot of them misconceptually, like they think that you don't have to plan when you're
Yeah.
using Kanban. You're like, no, you plan more when you're in
Yes.
Kanban.
Yes. And you plan on demand, which is actually the most agile way you can plan, right?
Absolutely. I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's not
So
about having one big plan. It's about actually loads of plans and constantly changing how,
exactly.
not constantly changing that plan, but you adapting.
Constantly adjusting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Adjusting and adapting.
adapting, because you're finding out more information as you're actually doing the work, and you can, pivot if you need to, or continue.
Mm-hmm. And when developers are happy, they also tell other developers that, hey, we do Kanban. It's nice. It helped
Yeah,
us a lot.
well, brilliant. Yeah.
It made our life easier. Like, for example, the WIP limits, they are the visualization as everything on the board. Yeah. So if you are limiting work in progress, this is the visualization of the team's capacity.
Yeah.
So you're just giving a strong signal, hey, this team can tackle 5 items at the same time and no more. If you give them 20, then
Mm.
be prepared, they will do 5, then the next 5, then the next 5, right? So this is a very valuable information also from the management and requirement prioritization point of view, and it protects the team from over pushing on them, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like we can always squeeze in another story, another requirement, another
Yeah.
thing. No, this is our capacity. If you
And
want to squeeze something in, take something out. And I know that Scrum is actually telling you the same thing, right? If you are adding something to the sprint, you should renegotiate the scope because something should probably be removed. However, do we really do that?
No,
Not
rarely,
always, yeah.
if ever. Yeah, no, and the thing is, like, cognitively speaking, if you're working on something productivity wise, if you stop, take it out, and do something else, and then bring it back in the sprint after, you would have lost the momentum, the
Yeah,
flow of the thought process of how you were doing that solution, and that actually obviously impact your rate of sort of, what is it, your flow, your productivity. um so I think we've come to the end of our interview, and it's just been a joy. I've been smiling and laughing the whole time, and I've just thought about so many other follow-up questions that I'll have to pick your brain on later on at some point. Can you please tell me what is on your current continuous learning journey?
oh, well, right now, as I am working a lot with the Kanban teams that are supporting other teams, and I really like the name enabler teams. They are
Mm,
enabling the delivery. This is so nice. It has a nice sound to it. And this is actually something I took from the Team Topologies book that I'm
yeah,
reading right now.
great book.
And yeah, I can recommend it to all of you. I really enjoy it. And it can help you understand how the organization works as a system and how different teams can have totally different context. So if, for example, you think that your Scrum team might benefit from Kanban or other ways of working more,
Mm.
then maybe doing some analysis of what type of team and requests you have might actually help you find a better approach.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Just a very quick summary then. So we basically looked at the challenges with large scale Scrum, and I think the one that I remember is be patient, roll it out to a smaller group, get the results, or measure something so that you can sort of use that as a catalyst to move on. And then obviously the second question was around metrics and measurements in Kanban, and what I took from that was, don't just look at the obvious, which is how many user stories, how many epics you've completed. It's actually more about sort of how much time is it taking you to get the information at the right level before you sort of, before you can start. And also measuring, things like what's the cost of delay, what's the cost of the bugs, the problems that you're getting, and also the changes that you've had to make. And then I think we moved on to how to design your board. Actually, we moved on to way other things, but I'm going to try to stick to the Kanban board design, and how we can do that with complex workflows. And the biggest take from that is meet the people where they are. Don't try to force them into something. Look at what they're currently doing, look at some bottlenecks, maybe exposing some bad practices, and then try to solve these, then give them a design. So basically do it with them, don't just give it to them,
Yeah.
do it with them, invite them onto that. And then lastly, we spoke about Kanban adoption and change management. And yeah, that was literally a couple of minutes ago, so I'm not going to do a big summary on that. Where can people get hold of you? Tell us a little bit about where's a good place. How can we go to your training? I'm going to put some links in the chat. Other
Yeah,
than
hopefully you can see some links here to my classes, and of course you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. There will be a link as well here.
yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I really encourage you to reach out. I like making new acquaintance. If you have any questions or would like to learn more about Kanban, just reach out, write to me. Maybe I will not answer the same day, but I will answer.
Eva, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I honestly, I've learned so much from this call. I really, really appreciate your time, and for my viewers, if you really enjoyed this, please like or subscribe and share it with your friends. Share the goodness. All right, awesome. Do you know what? I'm looking forward to going back into work and just like preaching about some of the changes that we've talked about. And I'm going to share this video with some of my colleagues at work as well. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Eva, and it's been fantastic chatting to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really grateful for the invitation. It was awesome to be your guest. And
Thank
I really
you.
hope that the viewers will enjoy our conversation.
Super, I'm sure they will. Thank you so much.